storm brews over the North Sea. The wind howls, the waves crash against wooden hulls, and the dragon-headed longships surge forward, their sails filled with the fury of the gods. At their helm stands a man whose name would echo through the ages. A warrior, a raider, a king, and a legend. His name was Ragnar Lothbrok, but was he real, a true historical figure, or merely the greatest of Viking myths? The sagas tell of a man who defied kings, conquered lands, and carved his name into history with blood and iron. But his story, like the sea he sailed, is shrouded in mystery, a tale of ambition, courage, and vengeance that has captivated imaginations for over 1,000 years. This is the tale of Ragnar Lothbrok. Ragnar's origins are as mysterious as the mists of Scandinavia. The sagas claim he was the son of the Swedish king Sigurd Ring, but no records confirm this. Others say he was a common farmer, rising through courage and cunning, forging his destiny with his own hands. What we do know is that he was unlike any other man. In the frozen lands of the north, where winter's grip holds tight for months on end, only the strongest survive. And Ragnar was strong, not just in body, but in spirit. His eyes, they say, burned with an inner fire that could not be extinguished, a fire that drove him ever onward, ever outward, seeking glory and gold beyond the horizon. The sagas tell of his first great feat, slaying a giant serpent that terrorized the lands of a powerful jarl. The beast's venom was deadly, capable of killing a man with a single drop. But Ragnar was clever. He fashioned armor from thick wool and soaked it in tar, creating an impenetrable barrier between his skin and the serpent's fangs. With spear in hand, he faced the monster alone. The battle was fierce, but Ragnar emerged victorious, earning him the name Lothbrok, Hairy Breeches, a name that would soon strike fear into the hearts of kings. His reward was the hand of the fair maiden Thora, daughter of the Jarl. Their union brought Ragnar wealth and power, but more importantly, it gave him a fleet, and with ships at his command, the world opened before him like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. Ragnar was no ordinary warrior. He was a visionary. While others raided coastal villages and monasteries, Ragnar looked beyond the frozen fjords of Scandinavia and saw lands ripe for the taking, kingdoms whose wealth could make him not just a jarl, but a king. His most audacious raid came in 845 AD. While other Viking leaders were content with picking at the fringes of the Frankish Empire, Ragnar set his sights on its very heart. His target? The jewel of Charlemagne's realm, Paris. The Frankish people believed themselves safe behind their walls and their faith. They thought no northern barbarian would dare strike so deep into their territory. They were wrong. With a fleet of 120 ships and thousands of warriors, Ragnar sailed up the Seine, leaving a trail of fire and blood in his wake. Villagers fled at the sight of dragon-headed ships on the horizon. Churches emptied as priests buried their treasures and ran for their lives. When Ragnar's army reached Paris, the city's defenses crumbled before the Viking onslaught like sand before the tide. Even the mighty King Charles the Bald, grandson of Charlemagne himself, could not stand against the ferocity of the Northmen. Desperate to save his city from complete destruction, the Frankish king paid a ransom of 7,000 pounds of silver, a fortune beyond imagining, to make Ragnar leave. Some say the payment was cursed, for many of Ragnar's men fell ill on the journey home. But Ragnar himself survived, as if protected by the gods themselves. He returned to Scandinavia, not just a wealthy man, but a legend. Skalds composed poems about his deeds. His name was whispered with awe around hearthfires. Ragnar had won more than silver. He had won immortality in the sagas. Among the many tales of Ragnar, one name stands above the rest: Lagertha. Before Thora, before fame and glory, Ragnar met a woman unlike any other, a shield maiden whose beauty was matched only by her ferocity in battle. It is said that when Ragnar first sought her hand, she tested his worth by setting a bear and a hound against him. Only after he slew both beasts did she agree to become his wife. Lagertha was no mere companion. She fought beside Ragnar, axe in hand, leading warriors into battle with a fury that struck terror into the hearts of enemies. She proved that Viking women could be as fearsome as any man, perhaps even more so. Together they seemed invincible, but their love was as stormy as the seas they sailed. Ragnar, ever ambitious, sought new alliances, new lands, new paths to power, and so he left Lagertha and married Aslaug, a woman of noble blood, said to be the daughter of the legendary shield maiden Brynhild and the dragon slayer Sigurd. Aslaug came to Ragnar surrounded by omens and prophecies. She predicted that if they consummated their union too quickly, their child would be born monstrous. Ragnar, blinded by desire, ignored her warning. Their first son, Ivar, was born with legs of gristle, earning him the name the Boneless. Yet despite his deformity, Ivar would grow to become the most fearsome of all Ragnar's children. With Aslaug, Ragnar fathered sons who would change the course of history: Björn Ironside, Hvitserk, Sigurd Snake in the Eye, and Ubbe. These men would carry on his legacy long after his death, their names written in blood across the map of Europe. But as Ragnar's family grew, so too did the whispers of envy and resentment among other jarls and kings. For in the world of the Vikings, no man could rise so high without making enemies. As the years passed, Ragnar's legend grew, but so did the hunger of younger warriors to make their own names. Some of his old allies turned against him. Others questioned whether the great Ragnar had lost his edge, grown soft with age and wealth. The sagas tell us that in his later years, Ragnar was plagued by visions, dreams of Odin's ravens circling overhead, of the Valkyries watching from afar, waiting to carry him to Valhalla. Perhaps he knew his time was drawing near. Perhaps that is why he chose to embark on one final fateful voyage. Against the warnings of his closest allies and the pleas of Aslaug, he set sail for Northumbria with only a small force. He sought one final victory, one final conquest, one final proof that he was still the greatest warrior alive, the man who had made kings tremble. But fate, it seems, had written a different ending for Ragnar Lothbrok. King Aella of Northumbria had heard the tales of the terrible Northmen. He had prepared for Ragnar's coming, gathering an army that vastly outnumbered the Viking force. When Ragnar's ships landed on English shores, they sailed into a trap. The battle was brief and brutal. Ragnar fought with the fury of 10 men, his axe rising and falling like the hammer of Thor himself. But even the greatest warrior cannot stand alone against an army. One by one, his men fell around him, until at last, exhausted and wounded, Ragnar was captured. Bound in chains, he was dragged before King Aella. The Northumbrian king had dreamed of this moment, of seeing the great Ragnar Lothbrok on his knees before him, and here his legend truly begins. The sagas say that Aella, fearing Ragnar's name and the vengeance his sons might wreak, did not grant him a warrior's death by the sword. Instead, he devised a crueler execution. Ragnar was thrown into a pit of venomous snakes. As the serpents coiled around him, sinking their fangs into his flesh, filling his veins with fire, Ragnar did not beg for mercy. He did not cry out in pain. He laughed. He laughed in the face of death, in defiance of his enemy, in honor of the gods who awaited him in Valhalla. And with his dying breath, he uttered words that would echo through the ages and seal his fate in legend. How the little piglets would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffered. It was no mere taunt, it was a prophecy, for Ragnar knew his death would not go unanswered. His sons, his fierce and terrible sons, would come for Aella, and they would bring with them a vengeance unlike any the world had ever seen. News of Ragnar's fate spread like wildfire across the Viking world. His sons, Björn, Ivar, Ubbe, Hvitserk, and Sigurd, swore vengeance upon the man who had slain their father. They cut themselves and bled into a single bowl, mixing their blood to seal their oath. And they did not come as mere raiders, seeking plunder. They came as conquerors. In 865 AD, the Great Heathen Army descended upon England. It was the largest Viking force ever assembled, drawn from all corners of Scandinavia. Warriors flocked to the sons of Ragnar, eager to share in the glory of avenging the greatest hero of their age. One by one, the kingdoms of England fell before their onslaught. Cities burned, monasteries were looted, kings were put to the sword. The sons of Ragnar carved a path of destruction across the land, unstoppable as a winter storm. And at last, they came for King Aella. The Northumbrian king, who had once stood triumphant over Ragnar, now trembled before the fury of his sons. His army was crushed, his kingdom fell, and Aella himself was captured and brought before Ivar the Boneless. The method of his execution is still spoken of today with hushed voices: the blood eagle. His back was cut open, his ribs were split from his spine and pulled outward like wings. His lungs were pulled out and salt was poured into the wounds. As Ella's screams echoed across the battlefield, the sons of Lothbrok watched in grim satisfaction. Their father was avenged, but their work had only just begun. The sons of Ragnar would go on to establish Viking kingdoms across England, Ireland, and beyond. Björn Ironside raided as far as the Mediterranean. Ivar ruled Dublin, and Ubbe explored new lands across the Western Ocean. The blood of Ragnar Lothbrok flowed through the veins of kings for generations to come. Did Ragnar truly exist as the sagas describe him? Was he one man or many, woven together into a single legend by the skalds and storytellers of the North? Perhaps we will never know with certainty. The historical records are fragmentary. The line between fact and myth blurs across the centuries. The Ragnar of history may have been quite different from the Ragnar of legend, but does it matter? Ragnar Lothbrok became more than a man. He became a symbol, the embodiment of Viking courage, ambition, and defiance. A figure who looked beyond the horizon when others dared not. A man who challenged kings and gods alike. His name lives on, not just in dusty history books, but in our culture, in our stories, in our imagination. In an age when most men lived and died unknown beyond their villages, Ragnar achieved what few even dreamed of: true immortality. For as long as his story is told, as long as people speak of the Viking age with wonder and awe, Ragnar Lothbrok will never truly die. And even now, over 1,000 years later, we can raise our cups as the Vikings once did, and offer a toast to his memory. Skål to Ragnar Lothbrok, farmer, warrior, king, and legend. May his tale never be forgotten.